Matt, man, thanks for being here. I really appreciate your time today.
Hell yeah, let's do it.
So, you got a lot of hats that you wear in your world. You've got your own podcast, you've got a newsletter, you've got podcasts you do with some of your buddies in the D2C space. Obviously, you're CEO of two very successful companies in Pela and Lomi. And what I've watched from you over this past year is how you've really done a phenomenal job of creating the brand around you as Matt, right? Like not the other sort of brands that you have in your world, but like, who are you as a leader? And that was very purposeful on your part. I know the newsletter that you built and then the podcast. I'd love to hear your journey from going from, hey, I'm the CEO of these brands, I got to market these brands, to wait a second, like people need to know more about who I am in the world, what I stand for, what kind of leader I am. Walk us down that road.
Sure. I guess it's like a confluence of a few different things over the last like 2-3 years. One, I spent a lot of time with our friend Dan, right? I've been watching him sort of build up like the Dan Martell everything. Mm-hmm. And we were in Whistler during the fires in 2023, and we like lived in the same house for a week. So we were spending a lot of time together and just talking about like this sort of like personal brand, this concept. That was like one kind of thing that was swirling around in my life. And then the second one is just like, is more cultural, which it seems like we're at a place in society, and I'm like saying like Western society, so Canada, US, where I think people expect to hear more from the people behind companies. So like the faces and the actual human beings. So like this people buy from people concept just kept rolling around in my head for a long time. And I think the third is that long term, right? So like I build companies. I've built and sold my first one. I'm building 2 more right now. Long term, I'm actually in the business of me. Mm-hmm. So I started to look at everything through this, like I am the holding company, and the things I'm building are just like bolted on to me. So like the actual center of the wheel is the business of me. And so as I got more clear on sort of like, and there's more to it, but like those are the 3 big ones, it just sort of became obvious that I need to be in front of my companies more. So like people know who they're buying from. It's like, this is the guy. And I also wanted to share more of my experience of building these companies. So like I first started off with writing a weekly newsletter called No Competition. That's actually like a little over 2 years old now. It's like 2 years in January. We're recording this on March 3rd. And then we sort of launched the Operators podcast in April of 2021. So like a few months after that. And then that kind of took off. And in the world of consumer, like that show is now big. And we launched a second show, which I don't host. It's called The Marketing Operators. That got big. So just like now we have a media company, like an actual media company. Like we just hired a CEO in that thing too. And I just like, I'm not afraid of being in front of Pela or Lomi. Like I'm happy to sit down, talk to camera, write scripts, be in front, like just do whatever. I don't know. Maybe I just have a belief that like, I think founders shouldn't be afraid of being in front of their businesses. So like all that together has basically turned my life into, I spend a weird amount of time like recording the work I do now.
Right.
So like, it's very, like what I'm trying to get to is a place where like, I don't actually set out to record or create content. I'm simply just like turning the cameras on while I do the work.
What's fascinating about the piece that you said, you are the brand and then you're doing these other things that are sort of attached to you.
Yep.
Is a reality that a lot of long-term CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs, their identity has been about the brand. And
yep.
So then when they exit their business, they're kind of looking around and they're like, well, who am I without this brand? And you're flipping the script and saying, well, no, it's the opposite. Like I'm the brand. I'm building me up as a brand. And yeah, I'm going to do these different companies, yep. podcasts, whatever, build a media company. But if any of these things, if I was to sell any of these things or not be involved in anything, my identity doesn't go along with that. Like I'm not sitting there like, who am I without these things? Because
yeah.
at the core, the identity that you're sharing out there in the world is like Matt, like this is me, this is who yep. I am. And I do these things, but these things aren't central to my life. They're part of my life. I'm what's most central to my life. That's the kind of message I'm hearing from you.
Yeah. It's the whole, like the Jay-Z, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. Like right. That, as weird as that is, it's like, that's kind of how I look at things. Like after I sold my first company, I had already like the not on purpose benefit I had, like I wish I'd done this is like, I just kind of had already invested in Pela and it was already going. So I went from running one company to like straight into running another one that was already like off and growing. So there was no downtime, and there was none of that like soul searching that happens when you, like, a lot of people we know, they sell a company, it's their whole life. It's been, 10, 20 years, whatever it is. They don't know who they are without the business. And I guess, my sort of like last 7 years of running this business has just been this unlock with like, actually, I am the business. Like, and it's not to say that I don't believe in building up teams and leadership, all that stuff. That's actually how you scale a company. But it's more just looking at myself saying like, I am the valuable asset. It is okay to say that. And it's like, I'm constantly working on myself and investing in myself. So like, why not actually view yourself as a business, right? You're just a business that's building other businesses. And that was like the little switch that flipped to say like, oh, okay, like this is a different model now.
And so that's shifted the way you work. I mean, as you say, like you're working and then you're recording yourself working at the same time. Like you're turning the cameras on yourself, and that's raw. I mean, that's not, you wouldn't even have the time to script that. Like,
no,
you need a whole
podcast,
right? Like,
man. It's like our podcast started from, we're talking anyway. Like the four of us are talking anyway. Like we help each other. We're building companies in consumer goods. We all like consumer. We all have a perspective on this. We're very tapped into our space. We know everybody. Like, let's just record for a couple hours a week. Like if we're going to have the conversation anyway, like give people a view into what this looks like. And like we stood up a media company. Like it's a sizable media company now just off of that. Like we're doing the work anyway. It's like, why not?
This is literally the start of this podcast. Like, this started because I recognized that I was having these amazing conversations. I happen to be very lucky, as you are as well, surrounded by brilliant people doing all sorts of fascinating things. And every coffee or lunch, I'm like, I should record this thing. This is awesome. Dude, totally. I'm learning a ton, right, from being there in the room. And then the ability to just say, okay, well, why don't I do a podcast and start bringing these people on to share what they're learning, the real raw thing that they're actually up to, not the piece that you're reading on LinkedIn or the thing you see on their Instagram or whatever, Facebook. Like, this is a real conversation. And this is what's actually driving this right now. So my thought whenever I think about bringing a guest on this podcast is like, do I want to go for coffee, lunch, or dinner with this person? Because if the answer is no, I'm sure as hell not going to record a podcast with them.
No, absolutely. And I think there's like two things, right? The first is podcast as a content medium is like just such a trust builder, and it allows, like, if you got, like, the hard part of podcasts is marketing them. That's a separate problem. But like when you do have audience, they really feel like they get to know you. Right. And that's a special kind of like medium. I think it's like podcasts and YouTube that can do those things. YouTube just get way more reach. But the cool thing with podcast is like you can take the content, cut it up into short form, and then use like Instagram or TikTok, which are really good at finding your audience, and then just start building a bit of an audience flywheel, right? And that's kind of why I like podcast, is like I get to talk to really smart people, and like it's actually helpful. So like every time I sit down to record a show, I get something from that conversation that works in my company. So like it's always a good use of my time. Right. I'm going to do that work anyway. And then it serves as like it's its own business. And then I can take that content, have it cut up and produced into short form, which then helps further build my personal brand. So, and that's kind of how I'm far from perfect at this, but like what I am trying to figure out always is how do each of these things all work together? So like, how does me having more brand and more presence help Pela or help Lomi? And then how does those guys getting bigger help me create for my own personal brand? And then on and on and on. And, long term, I'm like, if I look forward 10 years, you're right. I may not have Pela or Lomi, but like, I know I will have other consumer brands like that. I am certain of. I like consumer. It's just my happy place. So like, I may as well build up everything at the same time.
Well, the thing is, if we look at, depending on what you want to do with your next consumer brand, the people that are going to be behind you, whether it's private equity or VC or whatever else, like they're betting on the jockey, not on the horse, right? So totally. The brand that you've built up around Matt for D2C and the success that you've had, they're really betting on the fact that you can do it again. They're not betting on whatever the thing is that whatever the next product
and
is.
There's been so many like streams of value that I could have not planned. Like you can't plan for this. So like it's made recruiting great people easier. Right. Like we have people that work here that, learned about me and the company through listening to me on the show. The retail relationships, right? They listen to it. So like they get a sense for the company through listening to me talk about the company. Our software vendors all are a hell of a lot nicer to us and better partners because of my profile.
Right.
So like it is, and it's on, I have more, but like those are just top of mind. Like the access to other people, like when we started the show or I started the newsletter, it's not like I didn't have a good network. That's something I've like done a decent job building over the years. I'm not as good as Jason, but like I'm decent. The show and the newsletter have just turned it up by a factor of like 10 or 100. Now it's like I am one message away from needing to reach anybody I want to help with my company. So like if you believe in this idea that the answer to every problem is who, then having personal brand and like having content out there where people can like learn about you and connect with you, that's actually just relationship building on steroids.
Which is interesting. You said earlier, like people want to work with people they like, trust, and respect. I mean, I learned that at a very young age, thankfully. What's interesting is, as you bring it into this modern version of that, is that people can learn to like and trust and respect somebody they've never met, right? Through the act of just right getting it to listen to a podcast. There's a woman by the name of Sasha who is our lead program manager here, and she'd been with us a couple of months, and I don't know how it came up. We were talking about the podcast, and she said, yeah, I moved here from the Ukraine and I didn't really know anybody. And so I started looking for jobs and figuring out what I wanted to do. And then I saw the posting at Virtus, and then it was actually listening to a couple of your podcasts that convinced me that this was the opportunity that I wanted. She's like, I had two other opportunities, but your podcast is what clinched it for me. And I like, when I decided to do this, that was hiring process. That was not on the radar of one of the things that I thought would be, she's phenomenal. And to think that she had two other opportunities to go somewhere else and we wouldn't get this great chance to work together if it weren't for the fact that this podcast existed out in the world. And I think the other thing that's interesting, and I want to know your hot take on this, is like, I realize that the act of being on this podcast and talking about leadership is like, I'm leading out loud. Like I am saying these things about my beliefs and they're re-cementing them for me. I'm also holding myself up to that standard too, because the things I'm saying out loud, they're reminding me, yeah, I believe in this. This is how I want to show up in the world as a CEO, as a leader. And that is, again, a benefit that I didn't expect. I'm curious, like, what's your experience been about, chatting about being a CEO, chatting about the things you believe in, chatting about being a leader? How has that actually shifted for you, how you show up day to day for your teams?
Dude, you know what? It's like, I will say that hanging out, spending a lot of time with the same three guys like every week. I've had a few positions on like what it is to run a company and build teams and lead teams. I've had a few sort of belief systems that get challenged. Like even like there's some specific ones where like if you were to rewind the clock 2 years ago, if I believed X, it's like I've managed to like change my mind entirely and or sort of like shift in like sort of another direction. So I think it's hard not to. Right. And I imagine they would say the same, but like, then there's also like my friend group locally, that anytime you spend a lot of time with the same people, especially if those people kind of do your job, like they're entrepreneurs or CEOs, I think it's really difficult to not have it impact how you show up in your work. I mean, I don't know about you, but like the way I think is I write and I talk. So I need those two things to get clear on my thinking. So like having the newsletter and the podcast has just made me a lot clearer on like, where are we going? How do I think we should get there? What's going well? What's not? All of it. They just allow you to refine. And 2 years ago, I would have said, because I've always been like a pretty sort of like daily religious writer, whether that's just journaling or brain dumping, like I think through writing. I had this thing that like, I just think people who write think more clearly. And now I will say like even the pod or the act of like recording and refining your thoughts, that's also the same. Like you're just getting better at your job. And the CEO's job, like if you think about it, it is to think clearly and then communicate. And that's it. Like you don't do a whole lot else. Like I don't have actual work output in a day, like it's Loom videos,
right?
Slack messages, like,
yeah.
Stop.
You reply to some emails. Yeah.
Yeah.
But interesting, like in those thoughts and what you share, like, you can move mountains if you're clear, right? Like if you've got clarity of where you want to go with the business and you are great at communicating and you consistently communicate that message, then you can move mountains. I think it's interesting when you say like the group that you hang out with like is going to affect how you show up as a CEO, as a leader. I mean, I would extend it to say the movies that I watch, the places I go for dinner, where I go on holidays, my leisure activity, the sports I do, how I exercise, like so many of these things are actually so heavily influenced by the core set of people that I spend most of my time with, that the reality is like, if I was to think the 10 people that are closest to me, I'm pretty much I'm a combination of those people. I've taken the bits and pieces. They've made recommendations to me. My wife was introduced to me by somebody that I know through EO, like,
yeah, your forum mates is a big influence.
Forum.
Like,
yeah.
This is the thing. Like there's no such thing as like work-life separation, right?
Yeah.
Or balance, none of that crap.
Yeah.
Like, and the best analogy I ever heard of this is like you're not a superhero. You don't put on a cape and a mask to go to work. Like you're the same person when you get up as you are when you go to bed. So like, your job, and I think this is true of like any person in any role at any level of a company, your job is simply to be like, get better. Like that's it. That's like, get better, create more value. That's your job. You'll do well in life if you just sort of focus on those two things. So like, it makes sense then that all inputs into your life are going to have an impact on your quality as like the quality of you as a leader. That's just true. Like I haven't been able to figure out how to separate stuff. So like,
why? Because like we're one human, like this is where we started from, right? So we're one human being as we're putting ourselves into the world in this format, newsletters, whatever, like we're branding who we are in the world. And branding is really more just like telling people in a cohesive way what our purpose is, what our values are, what we stand for. That this is who we authentically
branding is consistency.
Are.
That's it.
Yeah. Right. I think consistency, people are really focused on authenticity as being a big thing. And I'm like, cool.
No, consistency. Authenticity is the wrong word.
Yeah, consistency is more important. Like, because if you're not consistent with people, it's really hard to trust you.
Without consistency, you can't say that there's like some level of authenticity. Like that's actually just that's the funny part of it. It's like, no, just show up in the same way always, and that will be your brand. And that because that's the truest form of yourself. Or like if you're building a company, it's like your company should aim to behave consistently over time, and then that is the brand. Like it's the consistency of the messages you put out, the imagery, the video, how you respond to customers, how you deliver your product or service. Like that's the brand. Mm-hmm. Branding is not like, you can't draw it, color it, paint it, visualize it, write it down. Like that's not a brand. That's what people like. Branding people think that that's a brand, but that's not a brand.
No, because nobody's buying those colors.
No, like nobody gives a shit, man.
Right. Especially when we talk about branding people, like you could have the splashiest website ever. And if you're super inconsistent with people, authentically inconsistent, like you are who you are inconsistently, no one's going to want to do anything with you. They're not going to trust you. They probably won't respect you. And they certainly aren't going to do business with you because they can see that that's not what they're right. So I feel like, this personal branding thing, if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, I'm so worried about what my website's going to look like. And like, what am I wearing on the website? It's like that. No one cares. Like really, that's not what people are trying to figure out. They're trying to figure out like, are you a real human being that I think I can trust? And are you putting out a product out there that's actually, whether it's a D2C product in the consumer space or it's a service like what I do, right? Like, are you going to deliver on that promise? Right. Because that's really what I'm trusting in, is that you're making me a promise and that promise is going to be delivered upon. Yeah. Right. And I think that if you're a CEO of a company and you're not out front of your company where people can see who is the person leading this business, and do I align with the beliefs of this person? Like, do I feel like this is somebody that I can trust? Then I know whatever it is that they're out there that I'm interested in buying is something that I can trust the outcome of, whether it's a consumer purchase, service, whatever it is.
Yeah. There's this, like there's an incredibly freeing, when it comes to building a brand, one of the most freeing things is to realize that like nobody actually cares about you. And like, not really. Like, dude, I sell consumer goods. We have a little under 2 million customers around the world. And most of them could not tell you like what I did last week or like what we did as a company last week. Like they just don't care.
Sure. No.
And that's not a bad thing. It's just, it is. It's just what it is. So the minute I realized that, then you can kind of go to like, okay, well then how do I want to show up in the world? Like it's about what do we want to do consistently? What do we stand for? And then the customer, B2C, D2C, B2B, whatever, they're just going to come in and out of your life when it's most convenient to them.
Mm-hmm.
So like your job is that every time they come into your life, you look the same, talk the same, walk the same, serve them the same. That's how you win over time, right? But other than when you're like in the moment serving them, they are not thinking about you. So like worrying about all the minutia every day, I think is a waste of time. Like I don't care what I'm wearing when I'm on screen, none of that crap. Like none of it matters.
Yeah.
It's all going into the fire hose that is social media anyway, and it's going to get like forgotten. So who cares?
Yeah. It's funny when you bring up this whole thing about, it actually goes to people pleasing as well, right? Like, so people
Totally.
which I have been afflicted by in my life, which is that this belief that people have enough time and energy to actually care about what's going on in your life. Most people are way too self-interested. And I don't mean this like in a disparaging way. I just mean like they have enough going on in their lives that they've got to keep track of. They might have a partner or a spouse, kids, they might coach soccer, they've got a business or a career, that they have a faith, and they maybe have a, practice or church or whatever they go to. Like there's a lot going on in their world. And so they don't really have a lot of time to be tracking what's going on in my world. But what they do know is in the moments when they see me, am I showing up consistently for them? That's what they'll remember. They're not going to, the rest of the things that are going on, they just don't know about and don't care. And so I think that's a great message you bring forward, because the amount that I think the average person walking down the street thinks that other people are actually even aware of them, or would give them a second thought, that's one thing. But think the people that are even closest to you, and the people that think about how much you're thinking about them on a daily basis. Sure, they might cross your mind, but they've got a massive life going on you know nothing about. And yet you imagine you know a lot about their life based on the last conversation you had, or the last moment that you traded a text message or a quick, in-person coffee. You spend an hour with them. If they're consistent, you're going to remember that. You'll definitely remember that that's how they show up for you as a friend. But other than that, like, you're thinking about yourself and what you got to do next, and what's, that's what you have to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It took me a while to kind of get my head around this too. Like, I think maybe younger and more idealistic, and now maybe just older and more curmudgeon-y. But like, it's true.
Yeah.
But there's some element to this is understanding that like human empathy, for as powerful as it is, does not work at a distance, not without like great focus, right? And a focus and frequency. So like, you're better off, at least I have been, just focusing on the people in my immediate vicinity. So like my team, my family, my friends, and like just showing up consistently for those people, because like then they go out and they show up for the world how like especially company. It's like, I want my team to show up for our customers in the same way that I would like to show up for my team and my company. So like, that's kind of how I look at it, is like just magnifications of like, what's the impact you want to have and how do you want everything to work, knowing full well that like empathy just doesn't work at a distance, which goes back to the like, nobody cares because they can't, and it's nothing to do with you. It's not, don't take it personally. It's not a bad thing. It just is.
No. Yeah. It's literally, they can't, like, even if they wanted to, there's just not the bandwidth capacity to be able to track, right? Like to track what you're up to. I'm curious, like, so we talk about this personal branding thing from a CEO perspective. I'm really curious, is there anybody in your world that's in one of your companies that's actually starting to build their own personal brand? Because I've been thinking a lot about this with my own team, and like, they are fascinating like individuals, and they're unique people doing really cool things. And they happen to work here doing cool stuff here too, but they've got this whole big life. And I was just chatting this morning with Catherine from the team and saying like, they like some really cool people that write newsletters, that are authentic. That's really what they think. They're putting those out in the world. They're doing social as well. But, this concept of everyone in the company having a personal brand, that's easy to experience, so that when somebody's buying something from you, they're not just buying it from Matt or from Mike, or you mentioned Dan Martell or Jason Gaynor. They're not buying it from just that person. They're like, oh no, this place is full of people that I trust, like, and respect. And they each have their own kind of cool brand. And they're like multifaceted people that I kind of like, I feel like I know them, but I don't really know them, but I've gotten to know them because they've got a brand. Has anybody in your space, like in your atmosphere, started to look down that road?
So like, individual brands inside of a company, I haven't seen that executed very well, deliberately or not. What I will say, like the thing that we're doing very consciously is putting way more of our employees on camera and showing like, here are the people that work here. So like, I kind of look at it as like consistent characters, right? Like when you go to the Pela Case Instagram account, it's like you're going to see a roster of consistent characters. It's like this is where, and the spaces. So like the containers, like this is our office, this is our warehouse, these are the people that work in this company. We're doing that. And that goes to what you're talking about, which is like, we want our customers to see the people behind the business, not just like the guy or a guy. There's lots of people that make things work here. So like we show the artists who make the cases, we show the people who pick the orders, like the characters, that's, if you look at it like this is a story, these are the characters, then that's kind of how we're crafting it. And it seems to work. Like engagement and comments and like all that stuff, people start to like come to like and trust the people they're seeing all the time. So I like, and this is the thing, I do think that companies need to do more of this at all types, B2C, B2B, doesn't matter. I do think that companies broadly are under indexed on the human element of all this. And I believe that in a world that like AI first world, which is where we're going real quick, where it's like very, very easy to make fake anything, the more human you are is going to turn into an actual competitive advantage, right? So like getting an early start on this and going more human faster is likely to turn out like that for basically no risk. It's going to probably turn out better than if you didn't do it at all. Like, and most companies are faceless and nameless, and they've got like, you would never know there's a human being behind the company.
And I think the thing is like the world, as you say, the world is going towards AI. So that's the red ocean that everyone's chasing. The blue ocean is what you're talking about, right? Which is say, no, let's double down on the humanness of this whole thing. Because like we can all spot AI generated content. As soon as it can be AI generated spokespeople, that's already kind of here, right? And the problem with that is that that's super inauthentic, because now I'm like, well, this isn't real. So I don't really know what's behind this brand. You're just showing me what you want to show me that you made up. And so then how am I supposed to trust you? Whereas the way you're going with your team, which I love, and I really appreciate this conversation because this isn't the direction I was thinking of, and I love this, is to say, like, let's put our people front and center and have the scenarios that they're in front and center. Like, hey, we're designing cases, we're making cases, we're shipping you a case, right? Like, hey, I just got a case, I unwrapped it. Like, I literally saw a person put that case together, put it on a pallet or put it into a FedEx envelope and send it out the door. I got a case like that, right? Like, and so I think I love the authenticity of being able to actually see these people do their job day to day, know their first name. I don't need their whole name, but like know their name and see that this is a real person doing this, and I can connect to that person with this brand. And I think that the speed at which content is getting created now that is, garbage in, garbage out, like throw it into ChatGPT, it'll spit out a thing, put it out in the world. Like it's going to be a tsunami. It already is. It's going to be more of a tsunami of content now that ChatGPT is built into Microsoft Copilot, that Gemini is in Google, like everything's got an AI, Meta's got
and there's like, and I don't think this is going to work for everybody.
Yeah.
But I do think it's worth everybody should at least evaluate if this is a thing. But like, it's based on this premise that whenever you have like a large movement or force in the world, right, there's typically like an opposing force.
Right.
And the example I kind of give my team is like, if you go back 10, 15 years ago, like the whole vegan vegetarian movement was like just insane.
Yeah.
And out of that came the like, I only eat meat people.
Yeah.
Right. And you can do this. Like every time you see like something getting like culturally really intense, there's like an opposing one. Like, the climate Greta thing is like, it birthed this like very strong resistance to it. This is just how it's worked. Like, and sometimes in history, there isn't an equal opposing force, like the smartphone. Like there has been no like non-smartphone, although there is like this subsect of people out there that are going back to like feature phones and flip phones because they hate the smartphone. So like, but maybe that'll like actually come true too.
So small. Like, I mean, when you look at the general, like your opposing forces are saying there's like actual polarization, right? Whereas the smartphone, I agree with your smartphone example because
it doesn't work there, right?
Well, so like, there's an insignificant number of people that want to actually go to that kind of Luddite kind of
my
approach.
my my thing with, if you're in consumer, even B2B, this is where like my theory is somewhat rooted, is I look at like the most valuable consumer companies in the world all sell things. They don't sell things. They sell stories about history and handcrafted and slow and heritage, and they sell desire. And I think that in an AI world, those stories get even more valuable, right? So like when you can just click a button and spit out an image or a video or something, people are going to seek out I want the like very authentically human version of this. So like I think slower travel is going to be a thing. I think slower food is clearly a thing. And
Why is
I,
Moleskine still a company?
right, dude, like look
Right?
at
Like, I
any
mean,
one of the luxury companies. Like
yeah.
look at watch companies. Watch companies make an
What?
arguably inferior product, yet they're worth so much more on an individual basis. So like human beings just do this. We tend to, when given the opportunity, so this is more of an abundance thing. If
Yeah.
you create a lot of abundance, we're going to start to value art, right, more than we would have if we had a lot of scarcity. So
Right.
I just think that if we're going to this world where like energy is really cheap and AI is there and it can make anything, then the natural place for us to go is like, okay, well, you know what, if I don't have to think about feeding myself or clothing myself, like I'm going to buy stories, because like there's already a lot of history and examples of this. So why would it be any different in an AI world? I think it's just going to be more. That's it. So like my whole thesis for our company is to like go in that direction, like, and the way I've thought about this is like you can be very human front facing and you can still benefit from and use all these AI tools behind the scenes. Like our companies are very technically savvy, and we're building stuff and have always built things for ourselves that give us competitive advantage. So like I'm not anti AI, it's the opposite. I'm just like pro human face. That's all.
Yeah, like it's like if AI is getting in the way of the relationship you're trying to build with your customers, then that's not a good use of AI. If AI is making sure that you're able to do inventory faster, it's making sure that you're able to reply to customer questions quite quickly, like things that are actually speeding up and improving the experience without taking away the humanness of it, then yeah, I agree. AI is phenomenal. I think, it's interesting when you say this polarization. I've always thought of it as like a pendulum, right? Like
Yep.
the pendulum swings too far one way, it's going to swing all the way back the other way. And then it's probably going to land somewhere in the middle, usually, particularly if it's politically charged, it usually does that. So even if all of us think something is good and it swings too far one way, then there'll be that opposing force created that will swing it the other way. And then eventually we'll land, left or right of center, which, the average human being, since we're all pretty much the same,
Yeah.
would agree, okay, that's probably better for all of us if we just kind of land in this sort of middle zone. I think that where we're sitting right now is, I agree with you, this return to what's real, handcrafted. Like look at the rise of luxury goods. It makes these like, why would you ever spend like a Birkin bag from Hermes, right? That bag can be replicated for somewhere near 1/100th of the cost of the production.
Always has been too.
Right. And yet these brands, as you say, watches are another great example. Like if you look at YouTube right now and you search out watches, right? You'd think everybody should be wearing some sort of smartwatch, whether it's an Apple Watch or, whatever Samsung is coming out with next. Like everybody should wear those. That should be the thing because it makes the most sense, right?
Horologically, they're more accurate. Like that.
Yeah, they're accurate. Okay, fine, the batteries die too quickly, but get a Garmin, it lasts a week. But the reality is that it makes no sense to have a product that's very expensive to make, that's actually inaccurate, that does only one thing, right? Like it just does one thing and that's it, right? And so I think this return to the things that, and it isn't really even about history. It's not about going back to the olden days or whatever else. I think as you say, it's really just the people craving something that's real in their life.
I think that's it. I think we're very like our whole species is extremely sensitive to stories, good and bad. And I think that like knowing that allows you to like, I guess this is the context here is like, I'm a marketing first CEO. Like I spend the majority of my time in my job thinking about like where are people at and how do I meet them there? And that's like with product, that's with messaging, that's with like all aspects of it. So I just think most of this has little to do with like going back in time and more just we crave these stories. That's just how we are. And I think that when you give people or those people get like some people get an extreme amount of abundance in their life, they crave those stories even more. And they show up in lots of ways. They buy ridiculously priced things, and it's mostly so that they can just tell the story, right?
Right.
So I do think that in an AI world, like I think about this, like what is the impact of AI going to be on my company?
Mm-hmm.
And then like you zoom that in, it's like, what's the impact of AI going to be on my team? And my customers, my life, like in general. And right now, it seems like the speed that this stuff is going, I'm spending more and more of my time trying to like untangle everything in the context of like the impact it's going to have on us. And I actually think like right now, you're an entrepreneur, CEO, leader, whatever, you should be thinking of this stuff because like the surface area of its impact is very broad. Not like anything, like we've never seen anything like this before. So it's going to change how we do business. It's going to do it at an alarming rate. And I think that the people who are not thinking about this at all are going to wind up flat-footed, even more so than like what the internet did to a lot of businesses and business models, right? Like this is even more wide-reaching. And it's also great. You know, part of the reason I'm leaning so hard into this like human to human, person to person thing is it just seems like an obvious place to be defensive, like build moat and be sustainable. Is it's going to be over there. Like there's a lot of people over there that are going to value that. And I don't actually know what the other side looks like. Like what's an extreme version of like an AI world look like? That is so hard to imagine that I don't even go, I'm like, because it's so unknown, I'm just not going to try, you know, like I'm going to stay over here. I know how people are like, we can deal with this.
Well, it's interesting. Like when you say that what the people that are thinking like, oh, well, you know, AI hasn't impacted my industry yet. I always think of that quote that the future is actually here. It's just not widely distributed yet.
Yep.
And so the reality is AI, we can't escape it because it's going to be in every single product. Our smartphones are going to have it. Any Internet of Things device will have AI attached to it. Our cars already have it attached to it. It's just in everything, right? Our browsers, like it'll just be part of our life. And to try to imagine that your industry isn't impacted by it, it's not if it's going to be impacted, it's just when. So you can either,
that's it,
right? Like you can either just be the person that is sitting back and saying like, okay, well, when it hits, I'll do something about it, but that's not great timing. Or you can say, well, I don't know how it's going to affect my industry, but I do know it's going to affect it in ways that some of the ways I just can't even predict. So what am I seeing right now? And then on the flip side of it, as you say, well, what's the counter to AI? Like what's on the other side of AI? Well, there is just human beings. Like that's literally where we're currently sitting. That's us. We're sitting on the other side of that. So how do we bring more humanness back into the work and the brands that we care and love and that we're part of?
Yeah. It's like if I told you, Mike, tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, or not, this would be more fair. In a week from now at 10 a.m., I'm going to take you out on the boat and I'm going to throw you overboard in the lake. If you did not know how to swim, you'd probably go out and learn how to swim. Like if you this is an absolute certainty.
Yeah.
You are going to be thrown in the water 1 week from today, a mile from shore. You're going to go learn how to swim. Like you're going to figure out how to float at least. That's how I look at all this stuff. Like there's so much inevitability.
That's a brilliant analogy, Matt.
I should
like
just
that
learn.
is like, man, that is so spot on. I love that analogy because there's no escaping it. Like you are going on a boat in a week. You can't swim. You better learn how to swim.
Yeah, and you're going in the water. Like it's an absolute certainty. It's not like you're going to avoid it. It's like, no, I'm telling you right now, I'm throwing your ass in the lake. Like you're going to learn. And that's how I look at all this stuff. And I think it's funny, like your job as sort of like CEO and leader is there's all this information coming in and you're basically a pattern matcher. So like you're trying to like sort through and find the patterns to make good decisions. That's like a big part of the job. This sort of like AI conversation is just like, it's a whole bunch more information that's coming at you. And your job is to sort through like, what do I do with it? If anything right now, no different than you would anything else, like hiring, firing, all that crap is just information. So like, to me, it's just increasing in volume and intensity so fast that it's obvious that it's going to have impact, you know? So like every time I meet a founder or CEO that's not, or leader of any kind, and I'm like, how much time are you spending here? And if it's zero, I'm like, that's not a good signal. You know, like you should correct that. Like this should be your probably like the thing that you read about and think about more than everything else now. Because a lot of the like, if you think of it, like company building hasn't changed that much in the last little while. Like good leadership is good leadership. Like those principles, well, there's a bunch of dumbasses who don't know anything about it. Like a lot of leaders I know like are pretty well versed at this point. We know how to measure, we know how to communicate. all that stuff. Some are better than others, obviously. This stuff that we're talking about is like totally white space. It's like I have an unlimited amount of employees available to me and they all work for free. Well, how do I use that? Like, that's not a resource that's ever been available, right? And I think that when you start to go through this, like this whole movement, it kind of breaks your brain a bit. So I just think it's worth, like, as a leader, this is a place that is very much worth spending some time on.
The challenge of creativity is it thrives within constraints. And the problem with AI from that perspective is that there are no constraints because, like, as you say, it could have unlimited people doing unlimited things. Well, that's a door too wide to actually wrap our arms around and say, well, like, what are we going to do about it? So I think I agree with that. I think apathy or sitting back and saying, I don't know, I can't figure this out. This is bigger than me. I'm not in the AI space.
I'm not technical enough.
I'm not technical that way, right? It's, as you say, it's like, well, smartphones aren't really going to take off and the internet's not really going to be a thing, right? Like, they turned out to be our whole world. So AI is bigger than those two things. If you can imagine back to like 94 before really the internet was really around, and how much it's changed since then. And then think how long the smartphone's been around. I mean, a while, but say the iPhone's been around for about 19 years. I think it was like 2006 when it first launched.
We're coming up on iPhone 17 is this year.
Right? Yeah. So iPhone 17 is coming out, right? So, it's how much that has fundamentally changed how we are. AI is on an adoption curve and it's not linear, it's exponential. It's not going to take that long. Like, the speed at which it's going to take over everything is measured in months, not years. It's certainly not going to take 19 years to get to the stage that it's at right now. So I think this is a great place to wrap, man. Like, I think your comment about, listen, I'm going to take you on my boat. I'm going to pull you out into the middle of the lake and I'm going to drop you in the water. So, like, your choice over the next couple of weeks, whether or not you want to learn to swim, you're going in that water.
That is, or at least float. Just learn to float.
Or at least float.
Like, sure. You don't need to be an Olympic swimmer here.
Tread water.
Just float, man.
Just don't drown, right? Yeah. So I think, this has been amazing. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation today, man. Yeah, it's good to see you.